The rain hammered on the roof as if trying to break through. Ilya, setting his book aside, went to the window. Outside, in the pitch darkness, it was pouring as if from a bucket. The light from the courtyard lamp barely pierced the streams of water, scattering into murky currents. He was about to close the curtain when his gaze fell on a figure standing right under the lamp. A man. He stood completely motionless, facing Ilya's house. He wore no raincoat, no hood, just simple dark pants and a shirt, soaked through and clinging to his body. But the most terrifying thing was how he stood. He wasn't sheltering from the rain or turning his face up to it. He just stood there, arms at his sides, and the water streamed off him in continuous, thick flows, as if he were made not of flesh, but of sodden clay. Ilya blinked, rubbed his eyes. The figure didn't disappear. On the contrary, it seemed unnaturally clear in the light blurred by the watery veil. He tried to read, but the letters swam. The silence of the apartment was now broken only by the drumming of the rain and a new sound. A dull, wet slapping. Ilya froze. He went to the door, looked through the peephole. The landing was empty, but the sound was right outside the door now, right on the doormat. Ilya recoiled, bumping into a console table. He exhaled, deciding he had imagined it. In the kitchen, he poured himself water with trembling hands, and he saw it again. Now in the window, facing the same courtyard, Ilya slammed the kitchen shutters in horror. Panic, thick and sticky like the water on that man, filled him. He ran through the apartment, checking every window, every door. Everything was locked. The courtyard was empty. The lamp illuminated only puddles, where circles danced from the raindrops. The relief was fleeting, because Ilya noticed something on the glass. On the inside, 2 wet, clear handprints, as if someone very wet had pressed against the glass from inside the house, looking into the darkness of the room. Water from them trickled in thin streams down the smooth surface. At that moment, in the bedroom, right above the bed, with a soft, penetrating sound that cut through all others, water began to drip from the ceiling. Ilya, slowly, with a soul-chilling certainty, looked up. On the white ceiling, a dark, wet stain was spreading. It was growing before his eyes, taking on the shape of a human silhouette. The shape of the one who had stood under the lamp. From its central point fell a heavy, thick drop. It landed on his pillow, leaving a dirty, wet smear that smelled of stagnant water and damp earth. Ilya understood. This is not someone outside trying to get in. This is the one who is already here. It has seeped in. It is wet, and it will not leave until it takes all the dryness, all the warmth, all the breath with it. And from the ceiling, right above him, it dripped faster and faster. And in every drop was a quiet, gurgling whisper, like the sound of a drowning person trying to take one last breath. It was one of those nights when the world outside ceased to exist. The rain wasn't just falling, it was crashing down on the city like a black wall of water, and the wind howled through the walls of my old house like a trapped animal. As usual on evenings like this, I was alone. My wife and kids had gone to her parents'. It all started with the electricity. The lights flickered once, twice, and went out, plunging everything into thick, absolute darkness. I wasn't too scared, it had happened before. I found a candle in a drawer, that one, thick and beige, smelling of honey and dust. Its uneven, jumping light created more moving shadows than comfort, but it was better than nothing. I sat in an armchair with a book, trying to read by candlelight, but the letters blurred, and my attention kept snagging on sounds. Rain hammered the roof, the wind creaked the shutters, and then there was another sound, barely audible, like the shuffling of wet fabric on the floor in the hallway. I froze, listening, as if someone was slowly, laboriously dragging their feet. The sound was definitely coming from the long corridor leading from the front door. I yelled, "Who's there?" My voice sounded unnaturally loud in the silence, broken only by the storm's howl. In response, silence. Closer now, my heart hammered somewhere in my throat. I stood up, grabbing a heavy bronze ashtray with a trembling hand, the only thing within reach. The candle in my other hand cast huge, writhing shadows on the walls. I stepped toward the archway leading to the corridor. It was dark there. The candle only lit a small island around me. I stretched my hand with the light forward, and the flame wavered, revealing a wet footprint. Clear, dark imprint of a bare foot on the dark wood floor. The water on it still glistened, and it wasn't alone. They led from the hallway, from the darkness where the front door should have been. Slow, irregular, as if whoever made them was dragging one foot. I had never felt so vulnerable. Light behind my back, and ahead the black maw of the corridor into which these footprints led, and they were getting closer. The last print was only 3 meters away from me. I jerked back into the living room, almost dropping the candle. I needed to barricade myself. The thought was wild but panicked. I felt the cold wall against my back, and then I saw it. Across the room, in the large, dark window of the living room, my own reflection flickered with the candle, a pale, fear-distorted face, and something else. Right behind my reflection, in the depths of the dark glass, stood another figure, tall, thin, barely discernible. It wasn't moving, just standing, blending with the shadows of the room behind me. But in the reflection, it was clear it was there, right behind me. An icy spasm shot through my body. I was afraid to move, afraid to breathe. I stared into the eyes of my reflection, and it stared back at me with silent horror. And over its shoulder, that dark, faceless mass was slowly, almost imperceptibly leaning forward. I lunged, sharply, with a shout, spinning around and swinging the ashtray into the emptiness behind me. There was no one in the air, but the candle went out from the sudden movement. Absolute, dense darkness swallowed me. And in that darkness, right in front of my face, I heard heavy, wet, ragged breathing. It smelled of damp earth and stagnant water. I scrambled back, blindly, hitting a table leg. Blood pounded in my ears, and then, in the dark, very close, a whisper came. It was soundless, more like a thought inserted directly into my brain than a sound. I am home. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, longing, cold, and an ancient, unbearable weariness. And I understood everything. The wet tracks from the front door, the shuffling gait. It wasn't that someone came in, it was that something had come, not through the door. It had always been here, in the walls, in the foundation, in the very history of this house, built on an old, forgotten cemetery. The rain, the downpour, had blurred the boundaries, and it had returned to where it once lay, home to its crypt, which years ago had become my living room. I'm sitting here, my back pressed against the sofa, writing this on my phone while there's still battery. Battery at 3%. No power. The rain is still pouring. It's here, in the room. I can't see it, but I feel it. A chill on my skin. The heavy air. It's moving, slowly. It's in no hurry. It has all night. I only have this scream. It doesn't just want me. It wants peace. And there's only one kind of peace here. The one that was here before me. Battery, 1%. I hear the shuffling steps stop right in front of me. The breathing has grown louder. It's leaning in. This didn't happen in an ancient castle, but in an ordinary two-room apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was home to Artyom, a lonely programmer who valued quiet and solitude. It was that very quiet that played a cruel trick on him. It was one of those autumn nights when the rain doesn't fall, but crashes down in a solid wall. Water lashed against the windows. The wind howled in the ventilation shafts, turning the building into a cocoon of noise. Wrapped in a blanket, Artyom watched a series, barely hearing the dialogue over the roar of the elements. He felt safe, sheltered by this white noise. And then, exactly at midnight, something strange happened. The rain suddenly stopped. It didn't fade or ease up, but cut off instantly, as if someone had turned off a giant shower. An absolute, deafening, unnatural silence fell. Artyom turned off the TV. There was something oppressive, lifeless in this silence. He listened, and then he heard it. A quiet but distinct shuffling of bare feet on linoleum in the hallway. Slow, measured. Artyom's heart sank. He lived alone. He was sure he had locked all the bolts. His first thought was a burglar. He grabbed a heavy glass ashtray and, holding his breath, peered from the living room into the dark hallway. No one. But the shuffling didn't stop. It was now coming from the bedroom. Trembling, Artyom called his downstairs neighbor, a truck driver. The man, hoarse from sleep, grumbled, "Are you high? My ceiling is dry. There's been no rain since noon. And calm down, I can hear a trucker a mile away." Artyom thought he was going insane, but the sounds continued. Now they were coming from the kitchen. He locked himself in the bathroom, what he considered the safest place with no windows. He sat on the closed toilet lid, clutching his head, trying not to hear that terrible shuffling step that seemed to be walking circles around his apartment. And then he realized the most terrifying thing. The sound wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from the ceiling. Something bare and damp was slowly shuffling across the ceiling of his apartment, tracing its layout, moving from the hallway to the bedroom, from the bedroom to the kitchen. It was right above him in his personal, lonely fortress that he believed was his, and it was slowly, methodically checking every corner. Artyom couldn't take it. With a wild cry, he burst out of the bathroom, intent on fleeing the apartment at any cost. In the hallway, he froze. Right in front of the entrance door, on the light linoleum, was a distinct wet footprint of a bare foot, fresh. It didn't lead from the door, it led to the door, from deep inside the apartment. And at that very moment, the rain started again, just as suddenly as it had stopped. With a deafening roar, drowning out everything, the shuffling overhead ceased, dissolving into the noise of the downpour. In a panic, Artyom ran out onto the stairwell and never returned to that apartment. He moved out, leaving all his belongings behind. Later, in his new apartment, he told this story to his new neighbor, an old man who once worked for the housing office in that district. The neighbor grew grim. "Ninth floor, corner apartment?" he asked. Artyom nodded. "An old woman lived there about 15 years ago. Rheumatism. She shuffled around the apartment, barely dragging her feet. All the downstairs neighbors knew that sound, and she died on a similar rainy night. In the bathroom, they found her only 2 weeks later. They said because of the damp and the heat, the body had decomposed badly. And the brains, son. That old woman had a quirk from loneliness. When heavy rain poured and the noise drowned everything out, she would walk around the apartment and talk to someone who, she claimed, walked on her ceiling." The old man took a drag from his cigarette and looked at the pale Artyom. "But the creepiest thing, son, isn't that. That old woman had calloused, crooked feet from rheumatism. Almost all her toes were fused together, the print of such a foot. You can't mistake it for anything else. It's as if it wasn't a person walking, but some kind of bird." Artyom said nothing. He didn't tell the old man that he had seen that very print, and that the mark on the linoleum in his former hallway was exactly like that, with fused toes. And now, on every rainy night, Artyom turns on all the sound sources in his apartment: TV, radio, fan. He is afraid of silence, because silence means the rain has ended. And that means that somewhere above him, or already nearby, a slow, slapping movement of bare, damp, fused feet begins. And there is no more white noise to hide that sound. All that's left is to listen as it gets closer.